I've been testing 4 budget downhill bikes. Now, the word budget is going to be a bit of a contentious issue because the bikes I've tested range from £2,500 all the way up to £3,500. The 4 downhill bikes that I've been testing are the Vitis Domino, the Saracen Mist AO, the Canyon Sender CF 7.0, and the nuke-proof Descent 290 Comp. Even though £3,500 sounds like a lot of money, it isn't compared to some of the most expensive DH bikes on the market that can top out at near enough £10,000. Luckily for the consumer, a lot of the technology on those £10,000 bikes trickles down to the lower priced ones. And in the case of our 4 on test, you can see that everywhere. The £3.5 budget that we've got on these bikes did open up quite a lot of options, but the 4 we've picked include 2 bikes that you can buy directly from the shop floor and 2 bikes that you buy online and are delivered to your house. I've been testing our 4 downhill bikes back to back on a wide variety of terrain, from everywhere including BikePark Wales' flat out rocky uplifted tracks all the way through to some more secret, steeper, fresher, loamier trails hidden in the valleys. I guess at this point, some of you are probably asking the question, why should I get a downhill bike over an enduro bike? The outright speed and capability offered by the downhill bike's suspension and geometry walks all over what an enduro bike can do. The first bike is the Vitis Domino. The Domino was launched in 2013 and has received a few facelifts during its lifetime. The last being in 2019 when we tested the most recent bike. Costing a mere £2,499, the Domino looks to be very good value for money. Like a lot of other downhill bikes in this price bracket, the Domino is made from aluminium. However, it gets the modern metric trunnion shock spacing and has 200mm of travel. The cables are externally routed and you get a 63-degree head angle, a 460mm reach, 446mm chainstays, which equate to a 1,263mm long wheelbase. All of those numbers mean the Domino's geometry is pretty bang on the money for a modern downhill bike. Where the Domino really shines though is its spec. You get a full Shimano drivetrain that includes cranks, shifter and derailleur, a RockShox Boxer RC fork that has the Charger damper, that's really important, RockShox Super Deluxe RC coil sprung rear shock, and SRAM's Guide RE brakes that use the guide lever and code caliper that offer amazing performance for their cost. The WTB rims have Maxxis Minion DHF rubber. The Domino's relaxed and modern geometry means that it has a really composed demeanour, whether you're bombing it down flat out flat tracks or on the brakes on really steep techie stuff. The rear suspension on the Domino does have a slight quirk, however. When you're deeper into the bike's travel, beyond its sag point, going through a compression or something where your weight is loaded over the wheels and there's a small root, rock or bump that the bike's suspension has to absorb, it can give you, in certain circumstances, a little kick through the pedals. Now I found going from a £350 spring up to a £400 spring helped to solve this issue, because it meant the bike was less likely to be that deep into its travel more of the time. Generally speaking though, the suspension was excellent at ironing out small chatter on the trail. The Boxer Charger damper is also spec'd on more expensive bikes. The Charger offers great adjustability and exceptional performance. The Shimano Z drivetrain performed faultlessly on our test bike, and that doesn't really come as any surprise. The kit is really well made. Although we had to re-bleed the Guide RE brakes from the factory, after the second little touch-up, they did perform as expected. And I've ridden plenty of Guide RE brakes, and they really are fantastic stoppers. The Domino represents fantastic value for money, and it outperforms its price tag by a mile. Top that off with the fact that there are very few parts you'd want to upgrade from the factory. It really is a great bike for a privateer racer. It does have a few quirks with the suspension, but these I think can be ironed out. Even though we did have to re-bleed the brakes from the factory, I didn't think this was too much of an issue and it could just well be a one-off thing. The next bike I tested was the Saracen Mist AO that cost £2,599 and is available on shop floors and to buy directly from Saracen's own website. Unlike the top level bikes that are made from carbon fibre, this one is made from aluminium but takes elements of geometry from the more expensive bikes that Saracen's top downhill racers use to go to podium success on the World Cup. The bike has a single pivot linkage driven suspension system that Saracen call TRL. That suspension system has 203mm of travel. In the geometry department, it's got a 63-degree head angle, a 460mm reach, 440mm chainstays, and a 1,266mm wheelbase. At £2,599, Saracen has managed to spec some impressive parts. You get a 10-speed Shimano Z mech and shifter, you get Shimano's MT501 4-piston brakes, and X-Fusion forks and rear shock. Unlike a lot of modern downhill forks, the X-Fusion RV1 fork uses a coil spring. Luckily for me, the coil spring that was in the fork from the bike was set up for my weight. However, for 30 quid, you can change the spring to suit your own riding preferences. Unusually, the RV1 fork has both high and low speed compression adjusters. Now, at bikes at this price range, that's not something that you see very often. Unfortunately, the rear shock that was on our test bike was a Fox RC. This isn't the same one that Saracen spec from the factory, but they did assure us that performance is going to be virtually identical. The rest of the bike's kit is taken by Core. That includes the rims, bars, stem and saddle. After the first ride on the Mist, I couldn't help but feel like the front end felt quite low. This meant I got the tape measure out right away to see what was going on. And as it turns out, it was only 5mm lower than some of the other bikes on test. So in theory, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But the fork stanchions were dropped as far through the crowns as they could be, and we already had a high-rise bar and stem on there. A little bit more digging revealed that the axle to crown height on the Fusion fork was shorter than the Boxer, and the Core handlebar had a slightly unusual shape to it. This meant that on steeper tracks, the front end of the bike was a little lower than I would have liked. A solution to this problem would be to put an even higher rise bar on the front, or you could change the spring rate to a stiffer one to help prop the forks up higher in their travel. The rear suspension on the bike certainly feels like it handles medium and bigger hits better than smaller ones. Personally, that's something that I prefer. I'd rather sacrifice small bump compliance to be held up and better supported through turns and compressions, and to not be overwhelmed when the bike bottoms out. Despite its 18.5 kilogram weight, the bike feels pretty flicky and lively when you're riding it. This flicky feeling is probably down to a combination of things, including the 650B wheels. I also found that the bike's frame had some inherent compliance. When you're riding over rough stuff, there's nothing particularly harsh being fed up through the bars or pedals. This is probably something to do with the frame and the wheels combining together, not being too stiff. The Maxxis High Roller 2 tyres spec'd on the bike weren't set up tubeless from the factory. If you want to get them tubeless, it can be a bit of a pain and an extra expense. Despite some small foibles, like the coil fork, a lower than I would have liked front end, and tube tyres, the Saracen Mist AO is a great performer that certainly inherited some of that downhill character from its more expensive siblings. The Descent is Nukeproof's brand new downhill bike for 2019 that replaces the Pulse that was first launched way back in 2010. Costing £3,500, the Descent is the most expensive bike out of our four on test. Not only is it the most expensive, it also has 29-inch wheels, unlike the rest of the bikes that all have two 7.5-inch wheels. The Descent's considerably more money than the other bikes on test, but what do you get for your extra cash? You get adjustable suspension that has 4 different positions, giving you an increased amount of progression through the travel, and 4 different chainstay options. The chainstay is adjustable in 5mm increments from 445mm right the way through to 455mm. For that extra cash, you also get the RockShox Boxer with the formidable charger damper, a RockShox Super Deluxe coil-sprung rear shock, SRAM's Guide RE brakes, and this is the icing on the cake, the SRAM GX 7-speed downhill specific group set. Unsurprisingly, the cockpit and seat post are taken care of using Nukeproof's Neutron kit. The 29-inch Sun Ringley wheels are wrapped in Maxxis Assegai tyres that have been designed by the world-famous Greg Minnaar. 29-inch wheels mean that as soon as gravity is on your side, the bike picks up pace incredibly well. I opted to run the Descent in the 450mm chainstay option, and the rest of the size large bike that we tested geometry includes a 63-degree head angle, a 460mm reach, and a 1284mm wheelbase. The suspension isn't especially supple over small bumps, but that doesn't seem to matter too much because when the Nukeproof's riding at full chat, it just brushes over the top of bumps. Unlike some bikes, the Descent has got an amazing amount of support deeper into its travel. It really manages to hold up well in big compressions and railing around turns. Geometry-wise, the Descent is bang on the money with the 460mm reach. We didn't notice any strange ride characteristics either. We weren't pinged offline, bucked, or sent sideways when we weren't expecting it. If you're not used to 29-inch wheels, it can come as a bit of a surprise when it kicks you up the bum on slightly steeper tracks or over big steep drops or rolls. This issue isn't exclusive to 29-inch wheels, but is certainly more pronounced on them, and I did notice that the Descent's back wheel had a tendency to graze my arse over steeper bits of track. The Nukeproof Neutron finishing kit did seem to work pretty well. However, I wasn't a fan of the Sam Hill lock-on grips. The problem I have with these is that they've got a double locking ring. That means that the grips are not able to rotate or twist or move even slightly over rough terrain. It does mean that there's some harshness transmitted into your hands. All in all, the Descent is a serious bit of kit for the budding racer and the slightly more seasoned rider alike. However, it is worth noting that the £3,500 price tag doesn't get you any better suspension than the Vitis Domino. You still get the same RockShox Boxer fork and the same RockShox Super Deluxe rear shock. But the extra money you spend on the Nukeproof Descent means you get a slightly different suspension kinematic, and this means that the suspension performs better than the Vitis overall. The bike that came out on top in this group test was the Canyon Sender CF 7.0. First released back in 2016, the Sender has enjoyed plenty of success under Troy Brosnan's riding in the World Cup scene. Since its release in 2016, the bike has remained fairly unchanged. But we don't blame Canyon for sticking to the winning recipe. Coming in at just under £3,050 shipped, including VAT, the Sender represents fantastic value for money. This fantastic value for money is in part down to the bike's spec and in part down to the way it performs. Not only that, it has a carbon fibre frame, which makes this one stand out from the rest of the bikes in our test. The bike's chainstay length is adjustable between 430mm and 446mm using a flip chip system on the rear axle. The 63-degree head angle is adjustable by 1 degree, either slacker or steeper, using adjustable headset angle cups. Other standout geometry figures include a 460mm reach and a 1273mm wheelbase. Not only is the Canyon's geometry up to date, it also has a host of top performing kit. This includes a RockShox boxer with the Charger damper and a RockShox Vivid rear shock that's air sprung. This bike, not only is it carbon, also has both front and rear shocks that have air springs. All you need to do is pump in or remove air pressure from the bike's springs, rather than changing out a coil spring in both the fork and rear shock. The RockShox boxer with Charger damper has externally adjustable low-speed compression and rebound adjustment. To keep the sender's credentials downhill specific, you get a SRAM GX 7-speed downhill specific group set. You also get SRAM's Code R brakes. These are the full fat codes with code lever and calipers. Topping off the list of branded components, you get an SDG seat post and saddle, an E13 chain device and DT Swiss wheels, along with Maxxis Minion DHR2 tyres set up tubeless by Canyon on our test bike. As the most balanced bike on test, it was exceptionally easy to go fast on the Canyon from the get-go. The suspension felt particularly supportive, its geometry was pretty much bang on, and the parts were almost faultless. The bike has a fantastic front to back balance. That's to say that the reach figure combined with the wheelbase and chainstay make it feel really composed and really easy to ride hard. On medium to large hits, the fork and the shock seem to work together flawlessly, and the bike's MX link makes the bike ramp up as it gets deeper into the travel. This means you can push really hard around turns and through compressions without the bike feeling like it's getting overwhelmed. There is a payoff for this fantastic mid and end stroke performance, however. The bike isn't especially compliant over really small bumps. That isn't to say that loads of chattery vibrations get transferred into the rider, but it just isn't that smooth. That said, it really isn't that bad, and the sender does do most of the heavy lifting for you. On top of the great performing suspension and fantastically suited geometry, the rest of the bike's spec is really good as well. The SRAM Code R brakes mean that you can stop on a dime, and the GX 7-speed drivetrain meant that there was virtually no chain chatter as you were going down the track. I was also not left wanting for more gears, so 7 speeds is enough for the dedicated downhill rider. The Maxxis Minion DHR2 tyres are a known quantity and performed exactly as we were expecting. The DT Swiss rims that they're wrapped around worked well, and we didn't experience any dings or harshness coming from a badly built wheel. The sender's carbon frame construction didn't seem to have any negative points, and looks like Canyon have nailed how they've managed to weave up their carbon. The bike wasn't particularly harsh, and I didn't have any problems with stiffness. And interestingly, at 16.6 kilos without pedals for the size large, it was over half a kilo lighter than all the other bikes on test. It really seems like the Canyon sender is a sum of all of its parts. Despite the sender's small bump compliance not being perfect, it didn't bother me enough to remove the sender from the top spot in this test. Whether you're a privateer racer seeking success on the podium or just a weekend warrior that loves to sit in the back of a smelly uplift van, if you've got $3.5 grand to spend on a downhill bike, you really are spoilt for choice. Each of the 4 bikes we've talked about here really do offer way fewer compromises than you might expect compared to their more expensive brethren. Out of the 4 bikes I had on test here, it certainly feels like the Saracen Mist AO would be best suited to the beginner downhill racer on a budget at £2,599. The Vitis Domino for £2,499 really does offer the best value for money. The most expensive Nuke-proof Descent at £3,500 is the bike with the most adjustability. You can adjust the suspension and the chainstay length. That means you'll be able to adjust and adapt the bike as you get better or your riding preferences change. Finally, it feels like the Canyon Sender CF 7.0 for just over £3,000 manages to balance performance, spec, price and geometry perfectly. It really is a confidence-inspiring, race-ready rig that offers no compromise performance. The CF 7.0 has the same carbon fibre frame as the top of the range Sender. That means it's rife for upgrades. Obviously, the Sender can only be bought through Canyon's website. That does mean that after-sales support will be over the internet or via the phone. So that could influence your decision and might make you lean towards either the Nuke Proof or the Saracen. For us, it wasn't a problem, and the way the Sender rode really did make it stand out above the rest. It's worth noting that our upper budget limit for this test was £3,500. That isn't to say there are plenty of other amazing downhill bikes on offer, but these are the ones we tested. What do you guys think of these 4 bikes? Did I get it right? Let us know what you think in the comments section. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and remember to click the little bell icon so you guys get a notification when we upload a new video.